Good evening, everybody. I would like to, just a sec here. I'd like to welcome everyone, for our third meeting of the vegetation ordinance that the County of Tuolumne is proposing. This is as I just stated, the third in a series of public meetings that we've held. And, the Board of Supervisors is very interested in creating a vegetation ordinance that will be put into place to further the fire protection for, all of our citizens in Tuolumne County. This came out of the Fire Safety Advisory Committee. And I would just like to recognize that on the committee is myself, Supervisor Ryan Campbell from District 2. Ryan is unable to join us this evening because he's on vacation, well deserved. But I did want to also say that we've got a number of personnel that are on the committee that are joining us in the call this evening. So this includes our Tuolumne County Fire Assistant Chief, Andy Murphy, our Sheriff, Bill Pooley, Sonora City Fire Chief, Amy New, the Tuolumne County Fire Chiefs Association, Chief Ferreira. I don't believe are on the call, but need to be recognized as being part of the group is the Miwok Tribe, Chief Jerry McGowan, Chicken Ranch Band of Miwok, Monica Fox, Tuolumne Fire Safe Council, Glenn Gottschall. We do have representatives that were appointed to the committee, including District 1 Representative Scott Friend, who's on the call. District 2 Representative Dennis Randall, I don't believe is on, though he might join us here in a bit. District 3 Representative Wesley Brinegar is unable to join. District 4 Rep Eric Hawley is on the call, and District 5 Representative Malcolm Carden is on the call. So just kind of wanted to, this has been an ongoing effort. We have a lot of ground to cover. As many people are aware, my background with CAL FIRE, this is extremely important to me that we move forward doing everything that we can. And so this ordinance is a huge part of our effort. So at this point, I would look to turn it over to our OES coordinator, Dory Beats, to walk us through a couple other areas.
Thank you, Supervisor. Just want to remind folks for tonight's meeting, our virtual meeting, some ground rules, respecting our speakers. Remember that our topic is specific to vegetation ordinance, and that if you have a question, please raise your hand to ask that question, or you can put that in the chat. As Supervisor Goldenberg stated, we do have multiple committee members that might be able to address that in the chat, or we can raise it to the entire group and repeat your question here and then answer that as well. We would like to limit to one question per person to allow for others to speak, and then we can come back around if you have another question, limiting your question or comment to 1 minute per person. Again, to allow others to comment on, and if there is no additional individuals requesting that, we can come back around and make sure that you can ask additional question or make additional comments. And a reminder, please mute your device unless you're speaking. We ask that you also turn off your camera unless you're speaking, simply because it helps with less distraction overall. So I just wanted to go over those ground rules. We'll reiterate. Open up. Oh, I'm going to mute you. Sorry, Kathy. There are multiple opportunities for public input. As Supervisor Goldenberg stated, this is the third in a series. And these first three are really just kind of generic in discussion. As we move into the month of February, we're going to get more specific with some opportunities to provide that input. We will have a series of geographical virtual meetings hosted by district supervisors. We hope to have some form of a draft presented to the full Fire Safety Advisory Committee the end of February. February 23rd is that regular meeting. And then there will be opportunity for public comment once it's presented to the board during the months of March and April, depending on the first and second readings and the process that it's presented. Our goal is obviously to have something approved by April, May. I know that we are shooting for that, but there's a lot of moving parts that go with that, including county council review, who's been involved in the process already. So just wanted to give everyone a little information on that, and we'll switch it back over to you, Supervisor.
So I appreciate it. And I think there might be a couple of people in the waiting room.
Yep, I'm getting
that
them.
would like to be let in, if you could please.
Yep.
So why are we doing a vegetation ordinance? This is so important, that we look to see what CAL FIRE has in the Public Resources Code 4291, as that gives a lot of protections, for our residents. But it's really dependent upon the people that are, working, within their own properties and with their neighbor properties. So the existing law, under 4291, vacant lots are not covered. And does this have an issue, for our folks? Certainly it does, because if we look at expanding our coverages, and we're still trying to work out, through all the details, but by doing that, having a certain amount of clearance around the boundaries of a property line, and looking at, the adjoining properties as well, is this going to benefit the property owners? And potentially it could very well benefit their insurance rates. I don't want to mix any words in that what happens or does not happen with the insurance companies is yet to be seen. We've had members of the California Department of Insurance office that participated in some of our committee meeting, and they indicated that they were working hard on it, but there's no guarantees, right? So I want to be very clear on that people understand that as much as we would like all of these efforts to be reflected in your insurance rates, we cannot guarantee that would be the case. Sonora City has an ordinance that they've been working with, and they've made good strides. We're looking at standards that are coming out of the CAL FIRE, State Department of Border Forestry and Fire Protection. They've issued standard that could really mandate, what the county does or does not do. And they're looking to make the ordinances stricter than the existing law. Would this make our community become more fire safe? I think, their intent is that it'll do exactly that. And we should be looking, to move forward. But there's some criterion that's being placed potentially on our funding, for grant opportunities. So we're looking at new ordinances that do not duplicate what we have existingly, placed right now. And we're looking to apply only to the private lands, not public. So these funding, requests, we are trying to be as proactive as possible, meeting the state requirements, but also do everything that we can to protect the properties in Tuolumne County. So Dory, I'll pass it back over to you.
Sure, thank you. So one of, obviously, throughout the 3 public meetings, as well as discussion with the work group. So under the Fire Safety Advisory Committee, there are 3 work groups, and it's the governance work group that has been working on the vegetation ordinance, looking at what other counties have done, what some of the issues are, obviously looking at the City of Sonora's ordinance, and really understanding what some of the concerns might be, as well as what would be required, as Supervisor Goldenberg stated, that we see coming down with the fire safe regulations that will be required. So just a few preliminary issues, obviously, that we've heard from individuals is the effect on property owners. And the concern really is, how is this going to affect many of our property owners here in Tuolumne County? And as Supervisor Goldenberg stated, the proposed vegetation ordinance would apply only to private property owners. We're not discussing publicly owned lands, even though we know that there are a lot of concern for the vegetation management that is needed on public lands. We are focusing on the privately owned lands. But there is concern for how this will affect those that cannot afford or meet the requirements of such an ordinance. We understand and know that we have a demographic, a large demographic of elderly individuals who might have, a financial, inability to pay for somebody to come out to do some of the work that would be required. And can't do that on their own. We understand that, and I don't know how we would meet, any language requirements that could be addressed in there, but we are cognizant that is a concern for the future with a vegetation ordinance. The other area Supervisor Goldenberg spoke of is specific to vacant lots. We have done, and we showed this at the last meeting, and happy to bring it up when we get through the questions. A GIS mapping of the number of vacant lots that are in Tuolumne County. And visually, I think most folks would be very surprised with the number of vacant lots. And we have received a lot of phone calls over the years from concerned property owners who adjoin a vacant lot, and there is no recourse or no mechanism currently right now because the lots are vacant. That would apply to vegetation management on those vacant lots. And so property owners have called up and asked the county to do something about the vegetation that is on vacant lots. So there is concern about that. Also, we do have property owners that have are vacant for legal definition. But they have permitted other types of structures or unpermitted structures like tents. And so how do we deal with those parcels and how do we help create a more fire safe community through this ordinance that addresses that? And we also want to be very cognizant to the large number of agriculturally zoned parcels within Tuolumne County. We hope to have more conversations with the Farm Bureau and landowners of agriculturally producing lots, because we understand that this could be quite a burden for those property owners as well. And so we are cognizant of that and trying to understand ways to carve out some language or at least address that in the development of the ordinance. And then the last kind of big area is specific to enforcement. We can create an ordinance, but what do we do to enforce it? Who will enforce it? How do we pay for it? How are we going to pay for that enforcement? And so, and what if a property owner cannot do the required work, is fined, and then cannot pay as a part of that? So just some of those areas that we are considering and some issues that we know that have been identified and expressed by many of our residents here in Tuolumne County. So Supervisor, we'll just switch now into questions.
Sure, and I would like to just acknowledge, I'm looking at a couple of comments that were made in the chat. One of them was concerned with, somebody having a parcel that has 30-foot standard applied around their property, but their insurance company didn't recognize. So like I just discussed, we're having difficulties, with the state insurance commissioner's office on dealing with these matters. Some insurance companies are starting to, quite frankly, come around, and they're being more cognizant of offering people, various discounts. But I just want to emphasize that, they don't necessarily, there's no requirement, for that to happen. The comment in the chat says the California Fair Plan, was, brought upon them at 3 times the cost. I don't know that on my personal home, we were at 2.5 times the cost, from what I had before. We received not a cancellation, but a non-renewal. And so that's what it cost my wife and I, personally. The other comment, that I'm seeing in the chat is that would any ordinance apply to a private homeowners association who has strict fire compliance requirements already in place? In my neighborhood, we have very strict compliance measures, and we don't have a choice if we're going to remain within, compliance, within our homeowners association. The ordinance that we're proposing will apply to any and all properties, that are out there. Looking aside the, the city of Sonora, who, that already has, processes in place, and we're trying to work with the city as much as possible to mirror, what they have, to make it as least confusing as possible. So just kind of wanted to jump into some of those, questions that were in the chat. So as we're getting to additional questions, if you know how to do so, raise your virtual hand during this Zoom meeting to ask a question. You can post a question in the chat. You can also simply raise your hand, and we'll be looking for that because we want to answer any and all of your questions to every extent possible. So back to you, Dory.
Sure. Well, does anybody have a question that they want to ask? I see a couple in the chat, but I just want to give an opportunity to anybody that has their hand raised or would like to ask it of the entire group. You can unmute. Thomas, go ahead. If you just unmute your.
So I get to re-ask my question because I was on mute. Huh? Sorry about that.
No problem. Thank you.
And I practice so much. No, seriously. So I apologize. I may have come in late. So as I'm looking at this ordinance, is there a time frame when it's going to be applicable? So in other words, once it's passed, you've got 5 years to comply, 3, 2. If you have a special circumstance, be it financial, physical, whatever it may be, who does that? What party does that get appealed to? So I'm trying to understand the processes behind that.
I know where Chief Murphy's at on here. So that is one. Go ahead, Chief Murphy.
Yep. Hello. So the plan, what would likely happen, again, this is all subject to additional discussion, but what would likely happen, what I think we would like to see happen, is that it would, again, by action of the board, would go into effect, but it wouldn't be a penalization thing right away. So probably what I envision is at least a couple-year period where it's education and compliance and not necessarily the enforcement part of it, just because it's such a new and such a huge issue to get out and to get folks out there and start doing it. A new, the phrase we all hear, a new normal will apply here too as well with this ordinance.
Does that answer your question?
Yes.
Perfect, thank you. Thank you, Chief Murphy. Anyone else? I've got a couple in the chat. If you want to unmute. I will start at the top. Randy Hanbelt, I think I saw your face there with Tom Crosby. Randy asked Supervisor, what is the vision for success? What is our vision for success?
So quite honestly, our vision for success is that we lessen to the greatest extent possible any damage to properties in Tuolumne County, right? And this is a whole new area that we're going into here, right? Because we're going beyond what the state requires under the Public Resources Code 4291. So what we're trying to do is prevent the extensive loss of properties that we've seen on fires that have occurred, starting back, the one that is well known to many, many people, obviously, is the Camp Fire in the Paradise area and what occurred there. But in recent years, we've been seeing more and more damage, that has occurred. And so as we approached, deciding where to go with an ordinance, we looked at quite a number of different counties and the other counties' ordinances and what they were doing and how they crafted them. And so we were looking to do what we can, to protect property in Tuolumne County. So there's the vision for success, Randy, really comes down to if we have a fire that starts in Tuolumne County, we want to see minimized damage, to any of our local people's, properties.
May we speak?
Yes.
Okay, this is Randy Hanville. I'm with Tom, so we confuse things a little bit. Look, Supervisor Goldenberg, I was looking for a little more than that. Our forests throughout the county, particularly the public lands, are in dire shape. But you go all over the communities, and they're in bad shape too. They're set up for Paradise, Greenville, whatever you want to talk about. And we just dodged a major bullet with Washington Fire. And if you haven't seen Jeff Sargo's presentation of that, I suggest you invite him to do that for you. And there are all sorts of issues there. But until you just start defining what success is and criteria for the homeowner to do things in terms of stem density or stand density and basal area, et cetera, you're gonna have a problem. I think you already have problems with your local ordinances on open space in 01 and oak trees and those kinds of things that were all in place years ago under Bev Shane when she was community development director. And those things promote the propagation of wildland fire because they encourage the citizens to do nothing. And so I think it's a little more complicated in how you got to get into the details of this. So they know when a homeowner takes on the task, he knows what he's going after up front and can do the cost. And you're talking 3,000 to 4,000, maybe a little even more per acre to do this kind of stuff. And around homes, it gets more expensive. And if you have to take down big trees, it gets more expensive. So I think you need to really think through this stuff.
So I'll respond to that, Randy. As you're well aware, a lot of the huge issues that we're dealing with are long-term ones that are building up over a good period of time. And it dealt with, the forested areas that are adjacent, to many of our subdivisions. They become just choked full of vegetation. And so, we're working closely with our federal cooperators, especially, the Stanislaus National Forest, and working to do what we can to remove that vegetation. Just recently, in the last week, there was some announcements that came out of the federal government that were very pointedly looking at what can they do to pump more funds into these efforts. Some of the problems, they're more systematic. You know, that the insurance companies, you know, they've been pretty much running, you know, a free rein, you know, where nobody's really controlling them. And so this is going to take a concerted effort on the part of not only the governor's office, the state legislature, the insurance commissioner's office, the insurance industry, the real estate industry, and the banking industry, right? All of these parties are being affected by what's occurring, you know, with our insurance rates going sky high. And so that has to be brought under control. And so we need to, hopefully a lot of our efforts here and that what we're doing, you know, to try and, you know, mitigate the dangers, you know, out there will be helpful. But the insurance companies need to be brought to task, quite honestly.
Supervisor Goldenberg, we have a couple other questions, I think. Tom, did you still have another question? No. Okay, is your hand up or down? Sorry.
No, it's up, Dory. Thanks.
Okay,
I just wanted to get clarification. Will this plan and this ordinance come with clear descriptions of what needs to be done on the properties, like for example, shaded fuel breaks, or, you know, some sort of a clarification for what's required, so that the homeowner can assess costs and you know, and figure out if they can comply or not, or to what degree that can they comply. If you could elaborate a little bit on the specifics for what a property would look like if they're complying, that would be helpful. Thanks.
Yeah, absolutely. And I know that there's other committee members that can answer probably a little bit more in depth, but that is the goal. And, you know, reading through many of the questions that are in the chat and what has been raised so far, Randy, you are absolutely correct. This is a complex issue. And there are many things complex about it. Reminding folks that the vegetation ordinance is specific to vegetation. I think there was a couple of questions in here related to building. And I really want to encourage folks to pay attention to the Board of Forestry. I know Ron Kopp, you're on, you made a comment as well about the Board of Forestry fire safe regulations that will mandate some building code changes, some things that will affect future development. And so there are a lot of things that are happening right now, and this vegetation ordinance wasn't a mandate directly from the state, but is something that we see will be mandated. And we see currently right now, in order to be eligible for future funding, we will have to meet the fire safe communities list. And a vegetation ordinance is one of those criteria in order for us to be eligible on that list. And that list is currently right now, counties are applying for. We have until April. We are not going to make the criteria that's required in order to be on that list. That list gets updated every 2 years. And as Supervisor Goldenberg stated, we could lose out on potential funding by not doing a vegetation ordinance because it is one of the criteria that they use to determine that. And the criteria is exceeding state requirements. That's what they want to see in any ordinances adopted by a county dealing with vegetation, is that it exceeds current state requirements. And so there's a lot of moving parts and a lot of different things that we have to consider. And all of these comments and questions are very valid and very important for us. And that's part of why we're having this, is to really understand that. Go ahead, Chief Murphy.
Okay, I just wanted to address that some more. So I'm gonna put in the chat the link to the 4291 guidelines, and with that, you'll see Tom, I think it was, that asked the question, or Tomas, the question about examples or explanations, or that's certainly our goal, is to put out enough material so there's no question about what we're looking for. And you see with some of the stuff that CAL FIRE did with the 4291, and there's a lot of other organizations that have good examples of what we're looking for. A big part of this there will be a need for a PR push, or public education push. And that's when I talked about, at least the first couple of years of this new ordinance of doing that with the public, public meetings, handouts, all of that stuff to get the message out. And even now, we've had, a couple of years ago, we had some grants, a couple of grants for a couple of months where where the county hired defensible space inspectors for parcels that had structures on them. So just basically doing what CAL FIRE does with their defensible space inspections, and actually working hand in hand with them. And a big part of that is just going out into the public and walking the streets and talking to the neighbors and explaining what the rules are. Because you're right, a lot of people don't even know, even though a lot of people know they have to have clearance, they don't know what they need to do. So that's a big part of what our plan is the education component. Examples, even as Mr. Hanvelt had mentioned, possibly going as far into stems per acre. There are different rules in there about reach and length of limbs and clearance up trees already, but certainly we want to paint the picture so that it's easier, at least visually, to comply.
Thank you, Chief Murphy. And I also put in there the fire risk reduction communities list, programmatic, the things the questions that they are requiring of counties, or the criteria that they are asking for us to meet. I also wanted to show the group, and we showed this last time. This is Tuolumne County, obviously color-coded vacant lots, agricultural land, and obviously public land as well within Tuolumne County. Just visually, the red areas and even the shaded areas are both vacant lots. And so there are a lot of vacant lots that we have in Tuolumne County, which is part of the reason why we're looking at this. So let me share that.
So I'd like to address, there was in the chat as well, Ron Kopf posed a question: will lot owners have some reasonable time frame to comply? Could there be some phased compliance? For example, could someone deal with setback from the property line as a first phase and deal with interior issues as a next phase? So we had two previous public meetings. We're having this one this evening, and we're planning some additional meetings more specific to geographical areas of the county and some of the supervisory districts. So the culmination of all of these efforts is we want to gather these comments, these questions, and move forward as to the best path to take. What we really want, is we want success, We want to be able to, reduce the fuels, look at the clearances. We're consistently looking to see what grant opportunities might be there. For some homeowners are simply, they're not physically able to do any of the work. Others do not have the financial means. And if we have any opportunities, to do that, we definitely want to do so. We're looking to try and implement this new ordinance around the 1st of April of this year, with the intent that we have time for property owners to be able to get completion of the work prior to the fuels drying out, for the 2022, fire season. So I just wanted to, address that particular question because it's one that, comes up, consistently. How can people comply, and how can we help them to comply? And that's a huge, huge effort. I see another question from Scotty. Would the committee consider to accept the use of other types of fire protection, such as U.S. Forest Service approved fire retardant products that are sprayed on properties to stop the spread of wildfire? There's a lot of different products that have been developed in recent years. Certainly, I saw some during my career, but they've made great advances in these products. Having case studies that enable us to see how effective they are is certainly part of the equation. But again, fuel reduction overall is the single best method, to protect properties. So Dory, maybe if you could look through some of the chat on additional.
I just wanted to, I see that Stephen added in here, just to reiterate, even though we are being aggressive with enacting an ordinance that yes, the 3-year phase plan with education before there's any enforcement is much more idealistic, as well as, we just want, if property owners choose to become in compliance sooner than that, then obviously that's our goal. But we do want to have something on the books this spring so that we can apply for the Fire Safe Communities list as well. So any other questions from anybody that wants to raise their hand? Craig. Go ahead and unmute.
There we go. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Hey, everyone. Do we have any idea what the ordinance is going to look like at this point? I talked with both Butte County and Nevada Placer counties, and those ordinances, for the most part, only apply to homes close to property lines. In other words, if your home is within 100 feet of a property line, then you, then the landowner of the adjacent property, that's where the clearing occurs, that and egress routes. There was no clearing beyond that. I think it was Nevada County, there's a cost share involved with it. Whereas if your property is adjacent to someone else's and they ask you to clear it, it has to be a cost share between the homeowner and that adjacent landowner to do it. And I think that's not a bad idea. I think that's a fair deal, especially when the other counties, the inspectors said right now it's complaint driven, and you get to the point where it's one homeowner doesn't like the other landowner, and that's the catalyst for the feud. We all know that, who've done inspections on properties. That's the way it goes. So do we know, are we going to do something like that where we're just dealing with structures that are close to adjacent property lines and egress, or is there something larger? Do we know yet?
We are considering the larger, obviously. We, as we stated earlier, there are different caveats and something that we are just considering. We have looked at those. I put up here for everyone to share. You can go to the Fire Safety Advisory Committee. We did put some sample vegetation ordinances that we did pull up. I don't see Buttes on there, but El Dorado County's on there, Placer, Riverside County. I don't see Sonora City's on there, but we'll make sure we'll add those. Those are multiple ordinances that we've been looking at. So Craig, yeah, you're right. Those ones that were only dealing with that adjacent property owner was something that we were studying because of the concern from property owners who had that vacant lot next to them. So
yeah, the only one that I saw that mentioned going beyond that was El Dorado County, but surprisingly, I talked to CAL FIRE in El Dorado County and they didn't even know who was enforcing it. And I talked to their development agency and they didn't know who was enforcing it. They said I should call the CAO. And it looked like they'd revised their ordinance in February as well. And I don't know what that entailed, but everyone I've talked to is just doing a very minimal ordinance based on proximity of structures to property lines.
Yeah.
So, I'll speak to that briefly too, Craig. From the county perspective, right? The enforcement issues, when we go beyond what is required as far as the state requirements, the 4291, if we, move this ordinance forward, that the county is going to have the responsibility to look at the enforcement issues. And Chief Murphy and I have had discussions about this. We're probably going to need to look at putting on additional personnel to assist in it. But CAL FIRE as a whole has been very, very cooperative and looking to do everything that they can do to assist us in these efforts. So it's not all, one-sided one way or the other, but we definitely want to, keep moving forward. But unfortunately, enforcement is part of the equation. We have to have that in place. We very much want people to do the right thing and do the clearances without us having to take those steps. But
I guess the real question is when we haven't decided what those clearances are, correct?
Right. So we're still here on this third meeting, trying to, and we're going to have additional meetings, coming up that we do need to, come up with a draft product, and our intention is to do that by our February 23rd Fire Safety Committee meeting, that we have a more solid draft that we can put out. But we wanted to take all these concerns in as part of the process.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks.
Any other questions that anybody wants to ask the group?
Can I say something real quick, Dory?
Sure, go ahead.
Yeah, so just kind of address Craig's question, and question has come up on the other meetings, and probably a lot of people want to know, and Supervisor Goldenberg touched on it, but we really are looking for input. If you have an idea, is it 10 feet along property lines? Is it 30 feet? Is it clear everything less than an acre? There's a lot of options. And so what we're really looking for is input. So if you have that input, please feel free to contact any of us or stop by, in my office. I won't speak for everybody else, but I'm sure they feel the same way. We want to know we got to do what's reasonable, what's safe, and what is going to work. And if people aren't willing to do it, it does no good to have it, an ordinance like this. So it has to be achievable, all those things that we know. So please provide that input, whether it's written. I'm sure there's some folks here that can talk for a long time, but we only have a few more minutes. But please send Dory or me or supervisors an email, Chief New. We do want to hear that input.
I think Ron has a question. Thank you, Chief Murphy.
I think this has been brought up a couple other times, but we have, I think Randy mentioned it also, we have a lot of O and O1 areas that from previously approved projects that a lot of lots are in that restrict the ability to do any clearing or fire fuels reduction in O1 areas other than by hand, which, if you can't use mechanical mastication and some of these other things, that gets problematic as well. Are we looking to address some of those previously approved projects or O1 restrictions in some current ordinance revisions, or how do we address that and kind of make all these things blend together so that it's workable going forward? Thank you.
Yeah, great question. And I'm gonna have I will have a conversation with Quincy about that, but I think that we might be able to find some solution for that.
So I did see a question in the chat regarding and I'm not sure how this is going to pertain here, about evacuation restrictions that might apply or be a deterrent while attempting to do brush or fuel reduction. Well, the whole purpose of doing, this fuel reduction, and we have some grant funds that are being committed now. We've applied for additional grant funds, looking at ingress and egress, routes, and lessons learned again, from, other fires such as the campfire in the Paradise area. We want to reduce those fuels along these routes. We want to allow our first responders to get in. At the same time, we want to allow people to get out. And so, we just need to keep on, working on those efforts, and we're constantly looking for any and all available funding, to do so. Another question I see in the chat was regarding the amount of money that's coming out of the federal level that might, be applicable for various uses in the county. Quite frankly, we do not know at this time. There's been no set amounts that have been, set that they're going to allocate to Tuolumne County that I'm aware of, at this point. Another question that came up was, can we include provisions that reduce useless water-based home sprinklers in favor of better suppression systems? Water systems fail in fires. And then it went on to say costs on construction for bad systems is a tax. So, there are many different codes that have been put into place that are already applicable, that any people, doing new construction, have to comply with. So we, home sprinklers, quite honestly, have been proven to be very, very effective in protecting fires, but typically they're based on, protecting a home that catches on fire. And so these sprinkler systems can extinguish that fire in the home. These don't necessarily address, nor are they intended to address, fires that are encroaching upon a home from the wildland. So that's something, that needs to be considered as well.
Supervisor.
Yeah, Dory, please go.
I see a couple comments, and we've had these comments come up with respect to roads and county roads. Again, this ordinance would be specific to private property, but just know that we are working on a plan, and we've requested funding to do fuels reduction along county roads, specifically in areas that we would be deemed, high traffic for the event of an evacuation. We've requested some funding for that, so we're waiting to hear for that. I think it's a great idea that if it would work, combining our funding and projects and working with some of their partners like PG&E and cable companies to doing vegetation then on the property owner side. Obviously, there's a process. We can only use funds for the county roads easement side of it, not anything beyond. That's a separate grant request, but it is definitely something that we are looking at, and a great suggestion for some, out of the box thinking for funding, for future funding. So we will definitely take that idea and try to look into it a little bit more. On the PG&E, I know that they are still working a lot on the line clearing. I don't know if we have ever formally requested it. I'll double check that. We have a great relationship with our PG&E partners here in the county. I will follow up on that as a side note. And so thank you, Stephen, for mentioning that in the comment.
I do see another item in the chat from Julie Johnson. And perhaps Chief New, you can address this. The question was, I'm sorry, go ahead.
She did already.
Okay. She answered it in the chat?
Yes.
Okay. Just looking down through the chat, Joy, do you see some others that we can?
I know the question from Mr. Hernandez on the presentation, and I'll show everyone where that link is at, but we have been putting the recordings of these up on the Fire Safety Advisory Committee's webpage. We will do that with this as well. The proposed criteria, we've been asked before about an actual draft. That is not made public yet. We're hoping that that will be made public, those criteria or draft language at the Fire Safety Advisory Committee scheduled for February 23rd, at which time then we'll load that up with the documents as well and make that publicly available to everyone. We do have, as I said, the recordings on there as well. So
Yeah, exactly. This session is being recorded, so we will post, this out so anybody can, have access to it.
Ron, you still have your hand up. Did you have another question? Nope, his hand is down. I also wanted to go back to one of the earlier questions. I think there was a comment, from Stephen as well, about the loggers to harvest private parcels. Yeah, again, absolutely, that is a great suggestion. As you know, we're focusing on the language of the ordinance, but as a possible opportunity, after ordinance is passed.
So are there additional questions from the participants other than what we're seeing in the chat? Please, we have a few minutes left here. Please feel free to raise your hand, speak out, and we'll answer your questions.
How can we help? I love that. Well, this last slide, attending future public meetings. We will, as I said, the Fire Safety Advisory Committee agenda will hopefully have this discussion with language. We'd love input there. Watching for Board of Supervisors agenda, we will post those as well. Noticing, attending the public meetings that we hope to have coordinated with all 5 of our district supervisors to participate in February and get, opportunities again to voice concerns and comments and recommendations. Feed us things that you think about after this, or in conversations that you have, whether it would be friends, family, coworkers, businesses, organizations. Invite us to come and have conversation. We are always available to come and have a conversation about your concerns, in community organizations. We're happy to do that. Keep an eye on those documents and recordings that we'll post. And it was posted in our chat as well. Thank you, Tracy, for that. But it's here both in our Fire Safety Advisory Committee webpage, as well as our Office of Emergency Services webpage. We will try and post more things, social media as well. That's a great opportunity for us to do that. And if you have written comments, feel free to send us an email at oes at co.tuolumne.ca.us. Or you can send them via snail mail or drop them off at 2 South Green Street. We're up on the 4th floor. Happy to take any of that, and we will be compiling all of the comments and suggestions into a format that will be accessible to the public as well as we get through some formal final process.
So I'd just like to revisit the insurance issue, right? It's huge, right? Everybody's been so tremendously affected by it. Put the pressure on, right? We're doing it from the county level. We've engaged the insurance commissioner's office, through our fire committee. Supervisor Kirk has had direct dialogue with their office as well. But, we need to keep the pressure on them that they have to do something. We can't just let this continue to go on and on forever, without there being direct relief coming back to the people that are, literally, in some cases, some people they're being essentially, driven, away from their homes because they can't afford the insurance, or real estate agents, can't even close a real estate deal because people can't get the insurance. Insurance Commissioner Laura, to my understanding, is up for re-election. So he needs to feel that, these concerns are out there, and that he needs to address them, quite honestly, more than just talk, right? He needs to actually take actions. If he doesn't have the power, currently, through existing legislation that allows him to do certain things with the insurance companies, then we need to look to our legislatures to make sure that that office does have the power to do it, because it's wrong, right? This whole business of the insurance companies is clearly wrong. So if there's no further questions, we've got just a couple of minutes left. Be glad to take any of them. If not, I'll give it a moment here to see if anybody pops up. Are you seeing anything on your end, Dory?
Nope.
Okay. Well, I just want to thank everybody for participating today. I think at one point we had a little over 40 people that were on the call, and I'm very glad that we had that amount of participation. Our first call, had, as Dory said, approximately 70 people, maybe about 20 on the second call. We got 40 here, and that's good. We want to take all of this information and see what we can do. And I do see a hand up, Bambi's iPad. Do you have a question?
Yeah, hi. This is Craig with Bambi. So I was just wondering, you're applying you're thinking grants ahead and stuff, but would there ever be any property owner help with grants, possibly in the future? Depending on size of property, because some people might have small lots, some people might have 6, 10, 12 acres, whatever. So the bigger the property, the more expensive it is. So land depends on the agriculture and such. But yeah, and that could be different criteria as well if it's agriculture or different zoning. But do you foresee that in going forward in the future for help with property owners to get expense related relief?
Yes, we've obviously done that in the past with defensible space. And so we would be looking for that in the future as well. We thoroughly understand that is going to be a need. It's a need currently right now without a vegetation ordinance. So yes, absolutely. It is one of those areas that we will continue to look for funding or, request funding for. So.
Yeah. Okay, thanks.
And we're also, when we look at the ag community, we're really looking to minimize the impacts, on that group, because we know that there's much larger parcels. So a lot of our focus has been concentrated on looking at, what efforts could be along roadways, because we know that there's a lot of fire starts along the roadways. So we would like to, keep concentrating on that. We're not trying to penalize anyone here. We're trying to be as effective as we can possibly be, to protect properties throughout the county.
Supervisor Goldberg, I know we need to wrap up at 7 o'clock, but I just wanted to make sure Everyone, this is a QR code. If you have the capability, you can scan this with your phone currently right now. It will go to a survey. We are asking some questions of the general public. We will be adding questions to that. If anyone has suggestions for questions in that survey, we will also put a URL link on our page for those that don't have the capability on their phone to scan that QR code so that folks can get the survey. Our hope is to do a spread in Union Democrat as well and get that on social media so that folks can take the survey and participate if they haven't been able to participate in our virtual meetings as well, so that we can really try to inform the public as much as possible. So I'll leave that up for folks to scan. Again, I got to thank Emily Kilgore. I know she's on the phone. She's on the call. She's the PIO for Tuolumne County Calaveras unit, CAL FIRE, and she helped us with our survey and a QR code. So she has created a monster. So thank you, Emily.
And just, to tag, take it, gathering your input, from this QR code on the survey is, important part of the process. I did see a last minute item that came up in the chat as well, inquiring about green waste. And that's an area that we're actively looking at. We want to make it as easy as possible for people, once they commit to doing the clearing, right? We want to make it so that they can get rid of those materials without it being a cost to them whenever we can possibly do so. So that's something we're looking at from the fire side, on the committee, and we're also looking at it. I sit on the solid waste committee, and we're looking at it from that perspective as well.
So I think that's it. That's all we have. We want to thank everybody. Thank you, all the committee members, all the public, all your questions. As I said, please, if you think of something tomorrow, next week, whenever, shoot us an email, send us a message, and we will continue to have these. As I said, we do not have the next one, even though we were planning in February. So hopefully we'll have that schedule up by the end of the week on the Fire Safety Advisory so that you can participate in future virtual meetings. And again, thank you so much, everyone, for your participation.
Thank you, and good night to everyone. Appreciate your participating.
Night.